this first. All right, so for anyone who doesn't know, I am Alex Fensky. I am the vice president of the new Friends of Mineralogy Virginia chapter. Thomas can't make it today, unfortunately, so I am hosting and being in charge. I'm excited to introduce Rick Kennedy. He's going to be talking about the Jackson's Crossroads Amethyst mine, which he has been intimately involved with for the past 5 years. And it's one of the most famous amethyst localities on the East Coast. So, Rick, it is your turn to go. Take it away when you're ready.
All righty, let's. Here we go for that. Okay, is that nice and big on everybody's screen?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so before I go too far in all of this, just a quick little background on me and this location. I've been a digger pretty much since I was 8 years old, like I'm sure a lot of us in this group have been. And I remember the very first time Paul Geffner showed me a piece from this mine, and then I saw the price associated with it, and it was kind of the same reaction that I had when I saw my first benitoite price. Holy cow. And then he told me that mining it was something totally different than anything I'd ever done. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. And then at some point he's like, you know what? You actually need to come down. And so this talk is really more about my experiences from 2015 until this year at the mine. And there's going to be a little bit of an introduction, but I'm not going into a deep geology because for the most part, well, the biggest authority on the subject is Paul Geffner, who basically says God sneezed. That is not good science necessarily, but for Paul, it's a very entertaining thing to do. So let me see if it'll do what I say it to. Yes, okay. So especially you folks that are more towards the East Coast already know this, but there is this nice trend of amethyst localities all up and down the Appalachians. And some of the best ones are all the way from North Carolina down to us. But as great as so many of these are, and I may get in trouble for saying this, there is only one JXR. I know this specimen has changed hands, I think, a time or two since I originally put this in, but it's still known as the Walensky specimen as far as I know. And it is still considered to be the finest piece that was ever dug. So let me give you a little bit of history. So our little mine here is really easy to see on satellite. We are just a little white dot in the midst of a big forest. Originally, there are stories that I'm sure Julian knows better about that go back like even as far as the turn of the century as people finding amethyst in this general area. But as far as I know, it was the clear cutting in 1988 that exposed the first crystals that people are like, okay, this is Jackson's Crossroads. Not much really happened until 2000 when Rodney Moore got involved. And most people in the East and Southeast know Rodney as a very prolific digger and somebody who has, you know, gone and worked a number of places. And Rodney got permission from the property owners and then purchased the area where the first crystals were coming out. In 2002, he partnered with Terry Ledford, again, another person most of the people here know of or knew. And they purchased even more land and started doing even heavier scale mining, as you can see by the size of that bucket there. So in 2005, Purple Haze LLC was formed. My buddy Paul Geffner, also buddies with Ryan Bowling and Joe George, they partnered with Terry. And then in 2007, Rodney sold his share of the mine to that company. And so Purple Haze and Terry Ledford were 50-50 partners. So this seems really old right now, but in 2007, it was on an episode of the Best Places to Find Cash and Treasures. I don't know if anybody remembers that show at this point. I was involved with it at the Benitoite Gem Mine, but there was this thing that we called the curse of cash and treasures, and it seemed like half the localities they visited ended up having some very, very bad luck or closed or lost access within a year or so. In the case of the Benitoite Gem Mine, it was that the BLM and the EPA got together and they closed the entire area. Very, very unfortunate. So unfortunately, there's the bad news that everybody knows about, that Terry Ledford passed away in a mining accident. So at that point, the partnership changed, and his partnership went to his son, who goes usually by Christopher Ledford, and then Christopher's wife, Rachel. Christopher had a lot of experience having worked with his dad for a long time, but Rachel didn't. But Rachel had the energy and the exuberance and soon became a valued part of our team. So if you're going to tell one story about Jackson's Crossroads, there's really only one word that comes to mind: mud. It's everywhere. It's everything. Besides the fact that we are in rural Georgia, where it rains a lot, we are in areas that are have had just incredible amounts of weathering over, hundreds of millions of years. And to make things even more exciting, our best targets are below the water table. So there is always water seeping in to make more mud. The mining area is never, ever dry. When it's 90 outside, that's a blessing. When it's 30 outside, it's awful. So again, the level of erosion, or not erosion, but weathering that you see here is, as a West Coaster, we're just too young out here. And there's just not that kind of so many feet of completely altered rock. As I say, you don't even get to bedrock until you're about 18 to 20 feet down. And even so, you have these islands of bedrock that will be between areas of more weathered material, you'll see in a minute. So this here is some granitics, and as you can see, the case bar is almost completely kaolinitized. Not sure if that's the proper word, but it's almost all turned into kaolinite. How's that? And in the mine, the pink is a very good area to make sure to avoid mining because it never seems to have anything good in it. So this is a nice way of looking at it. Now, let me ask you guys this. When I move the cursor around, can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, good. So the cursor right now is circling the amazing Ian Merkel, who is either doing a strange Georgian bird call, or he's pointing out two different units of material here. So this down here to the left of Ian on the screen is a big area of silicified rock that we quote unquote will call an island. Up here is what we called the monolith. It was a calcium-rich dead zone. And what you see is there are these islands over here is the beginning of another island. And originally everything was found up top, was all weathered material, but down here, now that we're pretty much done with up top, it's these places where we have our best hope. There will be another portion of this slide in a little bit, and I can show you a little bit better where some of the best fun happened. So our mining process these days is going between blocks of material with the track hoe in the mud. Travis Harden is our operator, and I've never seen anyone better in wet ground. It's very dangerous to work, and it's very easy to get a very large track hose stuck. And to my knowledge, he's never done it there. He's come out swearing a few times after almost getting stuck. But in this type of an environment, you always work from above, whereas at Hallelujah Junction, we always work from below. But in this case, there's always water coming in, and you don't want to submerge or get the thing stuck in the mud down there. So once we're in a productive zone, that's when we start looking for the peanut butter. And the peanut butter is this lovely caramel colored clay. And you could make a talk at Jackson's Crossroads about nothing other than all the different types of clay. You've got gray clay, you've got this caramel peanut buttery clay, you have this amazing pristine white clay that looks like it should be on, somebody's makeup table or something. But what you're doing, and usually what we're doing is with our hands, we're feeling inside. There's a lot of vugs, and not every vug has crystals. Most of the vugs will have druzy quartz because there's at least 2 and probably about 4 different episodes of deposition. And the first deposition was these tiny druzy quartz clusters and things that fill and coat the vug. And then the amethyst came later, and Ian and I are going back and forth between 3 and 4 more different generations. The big deep ones seem to be the last generation, very much like what you see at Hallelujah Junction. So we're exploring in there and feeling the crystals, and the druzy doesn't get much bigger than about 1/2 inch usually. So if you feel something bigger, it's probably purple, and that's what we're looking for. So I became a member of the crew in 2015, and then I was dumb enough to buy into the partnership in 2016. As I say, this is unlike anything I've ever done before. I am just not used to being completely wet all the time. We actually bring a different set of clothes, change in our container right by the mine, put on the booties and everything, go out, do our mining, come back in, take off the dirty clothes, hang them up. And of course, the humidity there is like 3,000 or 4,000%. So it's not like the stuff dries by the next morning. So it's very easy to have cold, yucky, wet clothes to put on the next day. We do a lot of laundry. We probably pay an upcharge at any Airbnb we're at because of just the amount of laundry and the crap. We actually hose everything down outside before we put it in because we've broken more than one washing machine. So my first time there, we were hitting stuff, which is great because you don't always. And admittedly, I'm only 5.5, 6 years into this, so I'm still kind of an excited youngster. One of the things mining with Paul Geffner, he's seen so much that I'll be like, oh, wow, look at this. Color's not good enough. Oh, but look at that. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, wrap it up. Put it over there. Okay. Well, we're really looking for better than this, Rick. So I was just thrilled to be finding purple stuff. The other neat thing about Jackson's Crossroads is because there's very little iron around there, the hue of the purple seems more clean than it does at other locations that I've been to. There isn't any sense of a muddiness or a smokiness to almost all of the amethyst, which makes them higher quality specimens. So this is what our table looks like. You will notice everything is wet. It rains a lot over there. And we tend to go in either the fall or the spring. The fall, the days are shorter and it's colder. The spring, the days are longer, it's nicer temperature, but every once in a while a thunderstorm comes and just whacks us one. I have a number of movies of rain that you do not see in California because I was just so impressed by it. We also had a lightning strike within probably about 300 feet of the Connex that we were huddled in, which is also kind of a lightning rod. So that can get a little scary weather-wise. So, as Paul would say, these are nice little trinkets, but it costs us $50,000 to $100,000 to do a project, and so we're really looking for better specimens. So these are starting to get into, these are not the top colors, but matrix specimens are nice because of the fact that the amethyst grows on top of druzy quartz. That is not a very stable configuration. And clusters and individual crystals fall off of the druze all the time and either need to be repaired back on or it's lost for all time. So any kind of nice matrix piece with well-formed crystals is a bonus. And I happen to love the flowers like here on the right. These are just absolutely gorgeous to me. So we had a couple of them that turned out to be pretty special. This one Paul called the Promised Land. He makes probably the more interesting and unusual names for the specimens. We got lucky on that one because we just barely missed. As you can see, this is the saw mark right here, as well as on the bottom, and we just missed the crystals. There's actually a hole in the back here. So we almost messed up a nice $5,000–6,000 rock. So this is the best one we found this year. I happened to find it, and you can see by this picture just how great it is, right? No? Well, one of the other things that I learned in my first trip there is if there's a piece that's going to need repair or other prep work, we don't clean it up and get everything because we don't want to wash out any little pieces, anything that could be used in a repair that should be on that piece. So basically it gets packed in its own mud and off it goes. But the end result was pretty good. So I don't remember who we sold that one to, but I saw it a year or two later in Tucson for 50 grand. Now, we didn't get anything near that, but it's a substantial rock. I like it very much. So after my first trip, one of the things that I learned is every single dig there is different. And we think we know what we're going to do, and then it doesn't work, and we got to try something else. And this time we went in almost blind. We'd mined out the areas that we knew were decent, and we had a lot of muck to move. So at this point, we had both Travis and Ian operating heavy equipment, pulling back the piles of muck and trying to expose new ground. So while they're doing that, you know, we're just kind of hanging out and looking through stuff, trying to find things, looking for float. On the left here, you have Travis, and on the right, you have Rachel Ledford and myself. So while we were trying to get from one place to another, and this happens a lot at this mine, boom, we found a really nice little productive area. And these were all lovely specimens. The one on the bottom right here is actually in my collection. So, and I think the one on the left here is on Ian's collection. But, you know, it always feels good after 3 or 4 days of not finding anything to start finding crystals again. So after a couple of days now, to give you an idea, right up in this area here is where that little hot zone was, and we went through it pretty quickly, unfortunately. So we've got all this, and so Ian just said, keep digging, go down, keep pumping out the water, and let's see what we can do. So that's what we did. And then we hit a very hard island. And at first we were able to move it pretty decently, but then it was just too hard. And, you know, we were afraid we were breaking more than we were saving. So as they say, sometimes you got to zag. We were zigging along happily, and it just wasn't working. So what we decided to do, we did a few different things. We were going to go and do some drilling and then feather and wedging. which is great. But when you have a track host sitting there at however many, hundreds of dollars a day, doing that kind of by hand seems a little wasteful. So we also then looked and we hired a blasting company to come in and do some blasting. So while Paul and Ian were running around for that, and Ian and Paul are both of New York descent, and Travis and Rachel are more Southern people. And so sometimes there's this little, please get the Yankees out of here. So we did that, and then Rachel gave this great big talk about how we had all the right people with all the right attitude, and we were going to find the greatest thing ever because we are the dream team. And all I could think about is all we're doing is clearing area for us to blast later. But you never know what's going to happen at Jackson's Crossroads. So again, this here is the island that we were trying to make room for and get stuff out of the way, so that we could properly drill and blast it. And this area from the island to just about where Ian is was supposed to be dead weathered ground. And, it's very dead up here. Well, we're digging around and we're just kind of playing around looking for little pockets on the side while Travis does his work. And then Travis is all of a sudden, hey, y'all like that amethyst? Hey, I got you some of that amethyst over here. Well, as it turns out, there seems to be areas where there's like this injection of the last part of the mineralization that pushed its way from one solid area through to another, and in between, all of a sudden, in the middle of what should be garbage rock, you have something wonderful. And that's what happened. So this was the first piece. And again, it's got a whole bunch of flowers. This one ended up in Travis's personal collection. And he actually carried me up with it in my hand. It was so sketchy down there. I actually jumped into the bucket and he lifted me up to a safer place where I could go put it over. But this was the winner. So after we found the first piece, Rachel and I just started very carefully going through everything and following this huge vein of clay that was like 6 to 8 feet wide, or 6 to 8 inches wide. And we followed it until we hit hard rock. And that's where I found that, pretty much upside down to where you see it here. It's probably at this point still the most valuable rock I've ever found. And we went hooting and hollering, and ended up going, Travis was smart. He said, we should just walk up and take this and make it safe. So we did that. Rachel had already called Paul a couple of times and she was all excited about it. And I love Paul. He's just like, it gets you like, I need to talk to Rick. So I get on the phone. He's like, so really, is it any good? And then I made a noise that I cannot repeat or my neighbors will kick me out. But it was, yes, Paul, it's very, very good. So he was happy. We actually had a major dealer fly down, take a look at it, and he bought it dirty for a lot of money. Paid for that dig and part of the next one. It was fantastic. And probably still to this date, the most valuable specimen I've ever found. So after these digs are over with, we save everything. I try and go through pretty much everything while we're still on site, and we do a lot of cleaning at whatever Airbnb we're at, and then I take them home and go through them again and do whatever trimming I need to do, and then send them off to the cutter. So the next trip, we were so happy after March. We'd already paid for another dig, so here we came back in November. So the very first thing we hit was a weathered pocket as we were trying to get again from one place to another. And Paul and I had a great time digging all of that mud for that one little crystal right there. So here's a group of us, Travis, myself, and Rachel, and that was a nice little matrix piece we found. And then here's some of the other things that came out. It was a really fun dig. The upper left specimen This isn't a particularly great picture of it, but it's at least a foot across. And that was such a neat little pocket. Rachel and I just kind of followed it for 6 feet up a little draw. It was a lot of fun. And the gentleman here on the left, his name is Chris Keeney, and he helped us out for a couple of seasons. So we found some really good stuff, but not necessarily great stuff until the last day or two. And unfortunately, this had to happen right after I left. But on the last couple of days, 3 top specimens were found. This is one, that's the other, and that's the last one. I think the last one is still in Paul's collection. The second one we sold to Rudolph Watzel, and I don't remember what happened to the first one. So unfortunately, the spring of 2017, we got off literally on the wrong foot, or at least I should say I did, because that's kind of a graphic picture. I'm going to move away from it quickly, but had the worst accident of my life. No one is particularly to blame. It's just sometimes bad things happen on a mine. In the safety meetings I give, I always remind people that we are the softest things out there. Between equipment and rocks and everything else, everything there wants to take a bite out of you. And unfortunately, it happened to me. And in the end, I'm very, very fortunate that I am still able to walk and play volleyball and pickleball. But my foot looks terrible, and I won't show you. So it was almost like my accident shone a tough light on the entire dig. They did find the specimen to your left. I really enjoyed that one. That's a beauty. And we did find a couple of other things, but basically what we found was where the deadest zones on the mine were. And we blasted a lot of them out. And I still think that below that, if we get the chance to get below, we're going to find better material. But unfortunately, the 2017 dig was really more of an exercise in mucking, which again, it's got to happen at a mine. So again, here are some few things that were found. They're nice. They're not fantastically nice. But again, as I say, the randomness of the mine ended up being more random than random could be. And just when you think you figured it out, Jackson's Crossroads starts laughing at you. So we waited a year and a half before coming back. And we really didn't have a plan necessarily at that time. And so we talked with Travis, and our motto is trust in Travis, because Travis, even though he's our lead operator, he's also our lead extractor. He is a big, strong man with a very gentle touch around a pocket, and he has more experience at that mine than anybody else alive anymore. He learned to dig with Terry Ledford. He watched Rodney dig and learned some of the ways not to dig. And he has kept copious notes on where things were in the mine in 3 dimensions. So his suggestion was, we got to go deeper, which is not an easy thing to do. As you can see by my picture on the right, it floods really fast there. But the idea was that if we could get down deeper, we could see if this mine has a future going down, because it doesn't seem to have much of one going to either side. Well, as it turns out, I ran into the coolest pocket I've ever dug in my life. And it was the first day I had been back on the mine a year and a half after my accident. About 2 feet to the left of this pocket, Travis had dug a really nice pocket with great color. Unfortunately, there was some damage to some of the crystals because they'd gotten moved around in the pocket, because this rock is actually very soft here. And this is not where I would normally expect to see a pocket. But again, what happened was you ended up with some sort of a water course that went from a lower area that was getting that had really good hard rock, and just heading up to the surface. So as a water course pocket, these things were like halfway cleaned already. it was just an amazing thing. As you can see here on the right, it was only this big when I hoed it out. And all of this rock is soft and grungy, and it's not where you'd expect to find it, but that's why you look at everything. So I named it the Welcome Back Pocket because I felt like the mine was welcoming me back after my so difficult experience a year and a half before. It had everything you want in a pocket, basically. It had color, it had luster. It didn't have the signature matrix piece, unfortunately. That was the only thing it was missing, and it was so fun. Again, these are right out of the pocket. And as you can tell, I'm still excited about it, 3 years later. So there was one matrix piece, and again, it wasn't top, but it was still very good. And I think many of us who have dug a lot have had this experience at one time or another. You're in this zone mentally, and you feel nothing other than the crystals. It was cold. You can't tell that by the fact that I'm in short sleeves and wearing shorts because I didn't care. It was flooding because the water level just keeps rising. So it rose above the level of my boots, and so my socks, everything got completely soaked and muddy, didn't care. The ceiling was covered with druzy quartz, and I cut myself every time I pulled a crystal out. I didn't care. That's what a great pocket does. So this is the best pieces from that haul. All these pieces on the left are great. And I believe on the one on the right is the one, my favorite one. And it's probably this one right here, if I remember correctly. And photo on the right is by Jeff Scoville. And there is a video, which I haven't figured out this thing to do videos yet. So you can see it on either of my Instagram or Facebook sites, or just send Alex an email and I'll send it to him or something. What a great pocket. So we went back a year later, and during the last year and a half to 2 years, there have been a few administrative changes. So in 2017, Paul Geffner bought 1/2 of the Ledford share. So then Paul and his group had 75% and the Ledfords had 25%. And then in 2019, Chuck and Heidi Moling, who had been customers up here for many, many years at the feed digs, talked with Rachel, and they worked out a deal to buy her other quarter. And so they are now our partners. Rachel is still, even though she's doesn't own any shares, she's part of the family, and we still always refer to her as a partner, and she's very important in the feed digs that happen as well, as like Travis is. So 2019, we left a really neat area at the very end of 2018, and we went right back to it. And it only went for about 6 feet, but we got about 5 or 6 really cool pieces. The one on the right is especially nice. And then we had the blast. We won't go into it very well, other than we made some very big mistakes, and we turned what we were thinking was going to be a very, very productive area of the mine into very, very small rocks and facet rough. None of us were happy. We were all trying to do our best. Mistakes happen. With any luck, we learned from it. So this is the other one, and I'm particularly proud of this rock. It's in the collection of Lance Ruffle, one of our partners. And this was really incredibly well extracted by Travis. His wife actually found the piece. She just went further in the bung. She's like, honey, and he's like, hold on, get out of there. And we spent about 3 or 4 hours doing cross cuts with the saw around it to make a really nice base area where we could then do a proper extraction. And then a lot of the pieces of this flower came out separately. I was fortunate enough to find all of the fits, and I reassembled it, but then, you know, reassembled here isn't the same as what you have here. So this went to Francisco Pizzotta's lab in Italy. And they did a spectacular job of trimming it and really exposing that flower. That piece is not small. The base is probably about 5 inches across here, and it's probably close to a foot high, maybe at least 10 inches. So towards the end, we found a couple other neat little pieces. The one on the left, even though it's not a particularly good picture, it shows the blue flash that Jackson's Crossroads is absolutely famous for. And when you can get that blue flash in a gemstone, it makes it, you know, much more valuable than your standard Brazilian amethyst. And then the piece on the right here is just the cutest thing. It's always fun to look at something like this and recognize I had no idea what that looked like when I pulled it up, because it was nothing but mud everywhere. I have found facet rough that I had no idea. I just, nope, that's a crystal shape. It goes, you know, it gets saved. You do so much by feel, even more than any locality I've ever done before. So at the very end of the dig in 2019, we got down really hard down to the floor, and Paul found this just massive cavern. That's the biggest pocket I've ever seen there. He named it the swimming pool pocket because you really could get in and swim. It was also right at the bottom of the pit that was flooding constantly all the time. So on the left is what it looked like, you know, before we started bailing. And here you start debailing it, and on the bottom of these areas, underneath and on the sides, you can see this is all Druzy quartz here and right here. Underneath there is where all the amethysts were. The color wasn't spectacular, but the aesthetics were just lovely. So when you get a pocket this big, everybody gets involved. We happen to have, Bill Mencken here is one of our crew, and he's a retired driller, and he is absolutely amazing behind a drill. And he's taught their other person, JT, and myself how to be fairly accomplished drillers. On the right here is a guest of ours, Jennifer Rumbo Drake and Rachel Ledford. And again, we're all just, when there's this much mud, and I hate to say it, but it was only about 45 degrees. It's not pleasant at all, but when you're finding crystals, the discomfort seems to go away. I wish I had a picture of what it looked like when I extracted this. If you go back, it was back way back in here and upside down. I had to lodge my head in about here, my shoulder about here, and then reach with one arm and hopefully have the other one under it to catch it. It was painful, but I love the rock. And actually, this specimen just went into Dave Weissman's collection, Denver this year. So 2021, we've gone through a year of COVID. We spent a ton of money in 2019 and didn't recover nearly as much as we wanted to. And we had this massive lake. And so we decided we'd do a quick, cheap dig and just hit some areas up on the surface that Travis said, you know, were still virgin ground and hadn't been looked at. Massive failure. We hit every target in about 3 to 4 days, did not find a single thing worth mining. And so again, when bad things happen, you gotta zag. So JT and Bill were amazing. They stayed all night, a few nights, to keep that pump running. And the water level, you can see, was all the way up here. And they got it down basically to the floor in about 2.5 to 3 days. It was incredible how much work they put in. And while they were doing that, we played with our little lizard friend. So after exposing the area, and finding some nice flowers and some other things, we exposed another ledge that needed to be blasted. This time we learned our lesson from before, used an awful lot less explosive, and we did a different way of setting the holes up. And it was a perfect blast. We cracked stuff, but we didn't blow anything up. And I found two of these, what I call tube pockets. Normally the pockets are at the top of a ledge, you got something underneath it, but these things went straight down. They were probably old water courses, and along the sides and where they opened up, you had crystals. So the first tube pocket, I found this one, and the second tube pocket, I found that one. And as you can see, you're pulling a lot of mud out there for not a lot of crystal for the most part. But again, when you feel it, when you hit it, it's great. There is a piece in my garden right now that I thought was going to be the $50,000 rock. I could feel decent sized crystals under it. It was under a thick ledge. There was no way I could get it out. It took 3 or 4 days of our other regular mining to get down to the point where the track hoe could actually get at it. And when I pulled it out, it was indeed an amazing piece with all kinds of quartz all over it and almost no amethyst. So I was forced to take it, but it looks really good in my bird bath. So towards the end, we did find a couple of higher quality pieces. This one, the amethyst, is a little bit darker than what you see here, but this is one of the best true scepters. We get a lot of druzy quartz scepters that are, like this size, but an amethyst scepter that's of decent size is very uncommon there. And I was blown away by it. And after making a base for it to put out, I kind of realized I wanted it. So I ended up buying it from the partnership for myself. So after our last dig, one of the things that we know is that the bottom is good, the north side is good, the northeast, the northwest have good potential, and we've still never revisited the area where the welcome back pocket came from. So we have 4 or 5 really, really good targets to hit. And for the first time in a while, I would say the future of Jackson's Crossroads is very bright. And that is all. Do I do the stop share then?
Yeah. Thank you, Rick. That
Hey, there we are.
really interesting. Cool pieces too.
Thank you. I'm open for any. Oh, I see a chat question here. Let's see. Someone says that the CLR works better than iron out. That is good stuff.
So yeah, if you have any questions, you can turn your videos on, unmute yourself.
Unmute yourselves and
ask Rick.
So Rick, when you busted up your foot, I saw you, I guess, a few months later up at Hallelujah. When exactly did you have that big foot injury?
March 7th, 2017. Not that I remember the date or anything.
Yeah, no, apparently not. So yeah, I guess I saw you a couple months after that. I think it was in May or so that I was up there.
Was I on crutches?
You were, and you basically parked in a spot pretty close to, you guys' tent and stuff, and you found a bunch of things there, and then you basically let my girlfriend enjoy digging for quite a while. So she was very happy with you, let me tell you.
Oh, I'm glad. No, then yeah, the crutches, I stayed on crutches the first 2 weeks of the dig, and then I used a hoe as a cane because it was just driving me absolutely batty that everybody else was finding all of these great things. I really wanted to be out there.
Yeah.
There was a question that came through in chat about facet rough, and let me look at it again here. Who facets the rust and how much does it cost? So we have a number of people that like to do to do faceting for us, but the gentleman that has done probably the best job, in my opinion, is John Rhodes from D&J Rare Gems. He usually charges us between $100 and $150 per piece, so it's got to be a good one. And for the question about beta quartz, as far as I know, we've never found beta quartz there.
Anyone else have any questions?
Question, in the pockets, it sounds like you're finding the amethyst at the top of the pocket and not at the bottom or the sides. Is that generally what happens? It's found
that is generally true. We usually don't find much on the bottom. The sides will have some things, but the best pieces are almost always on the ceiling. Same thing at Hallelujah, to be honest.
How come?
There are those that can probably answer this better than I can, but being in a gaseous state, I believe that gas goes up. And so the concentration, I would think, would be higher on the top of the pocket. Also, there's probably a better chance of cleaner surfaces for crystals to start growing rather than on the bottom where gravity has made, mud and clay get in the way. Anybody that knows this better than I, please step in on this.
When's
Maybe
your
I was
next
right.
open dig?
That's a good question. I don't actually have anything to do with the feed digs, but Rachel and Travis run those. So if you go to the Ledford Minerals site, I believe I saw that they were doing one on November 27th, right after Thanksgiving. But go to their site and they have a whole sign up thing going on there. And it's no longer signing up by the person, you sign up by the car. That way they make sure we have a church very close to us, and we're very sensitive to not get in the way of their congregations. And there's also a little cemetery there, and we obviously want to respect not parking around that.
So that begs the question, how long has the church been up there?
That whole area is old. As a Californian, over 30 years is old. But out there, Mallory'sville, and I mean, every building is a historical landmark. A lot of people don't know this, but one of the closest towns to us, Washington, was actually the capital of the Confederacy for like 3 days in the middle of the Civil War. So it was, a fully built town by then. So there's a lot of stuff that dates all the way back to like the 1820s, 1830s.
Okay.
There is a question about where do I pump the water to? So we actually have an entire set of settling ponds up above the mine that filter out the water so that by the time it gets back into the river, all the silt and everything has been sifted out of it. And we've kind of had that engineered, and we work with the local BLM, and I think it's just the BLM that we work with to make sure that we stay in compliance with that. And yeah, we've got like 4 different ponds at this point, just in case, because every once in a while we have, a hurricane that goes through, and there's a lot of rain. So we want to make sure we're ready for that.
How long does it take for the silt to settle out at each level of the pond?
I've not actually put that to the test because I'm only there every 6 months to a year, but I would guess that it probably, takes a couple of months.
Yeah. It's pretty fine clay, looks like.
Indeed. We actually, there have been a couple of times we've been approached by companies to just mine our dumps and take the clay. the clay could be more valuable than the purple stuff. Who knew?
Rick, do you find many pockets where there's been some sort of activity and the crystals have broken off and in the mud at the bottom, loose?
Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Because most of the crystals form on top of the druzy quartz, you find more individual large crystals not attached than you find attached. So yeah, there's a lot of that. And also because of the way that the flowers go, you also have, there's a lot of puzzle fitting. Ian and Joe are both great at it. I'm getting better. And oh, looky there. Thanks, Julian. 1788, Clark Station. Wow. But yeah, so we have a lot of times where, we're looking to see about repairing pieces back onto the matrix. But a lot of times, because all that was holding them on are all these little needles of druzy quartz, if you don't know exactly where they went, you're never going to figure it out.
All right, well, if that's it, then Rick, I'll thank you again for giving this talk. It was very interesting.
Yeah, great
A
fun.
lot of great pictures too, and cool to hear the story of it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I always enjoy talking to friends in mineralogy folks, because there's so many people that are just so amazing in their field here, and people just really know their stuff. I love it.
And then one final thing before people leave, we have our final talk for this year next month by Beth Hesacker. So come back for that, and then this will be recorded, or this will be put up on our Friends of Mineralogy Virginia YouTube page soon. So if you want to share that when it comes out, great. So have a good day, evening, afternoon, whenever.
Whatever it is.
That's like
Thanks,
morning here in
Alex.
California.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Thanks, Alex.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Rick.
Bye-bye.